Hey guys, tonight we go on a trip, not for fun adventure, but to see a hard, real, and tough truth. We're stepping onto the noisy, creaking deck of a 17th century pirate ship. Forget the exciting pirate stories, the chest full of shiny gold, the happy songs sung under a warm moon. Tonight we look at the truth, the hunger, the dirt, the constant biting fear, and the plain, hard, boring life lived on the very edge of being alive. This isn't a story for those who scare easy, but a deep look into why you, with all the comforts you have now, wouldn't last a single painful day. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And please, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always great to see our worldwide group come together. Now, turn down the lights. Maybe the soft sound of a fan can act like the far-off, uncaring sea. Let's start this journey together into the heart of a floating hell. You don't wake up to the nice sound of birds or the soft, gentle rustling of leaves in a morning breeze. Sounds that might have once started your mornings in a life that now seems so far away. No, you wake up, not gently, but pulled back from a rough, light sleep, into the endless, deep groan of wooden planks moving and creaking under your back. The sound comes from the ship's own frame, a constant sad sigh from deep inside, as if the ship itself is tired of its endless fight with the sea. It's a sound that gets into your head, a soundtrack to being miserable that never stops, day or night. Your nose flares up first, a sharp, sudden sting, your body's quick defense against the air that hits it. It's a strong, you can't escape it mix, the raw, biting smell of sea salt, so thick you can almost taste it, the damp, earthy rot of wood that's always wet, a smell that speaks of things falling apart and the ship slowly giving up to the ocean, and something else, something heavier, more human, a sticky sweetness mixed with sharp smells that stays in the back of your throat, a cloud of shared suffering. Light, if you can even call it that, comes through the small, dirty, slatted gaps in the deck above you. It is thin, gray, and not at all welcoming, doing little to clear the heavy gloom. It throws long, sad stripes across what you can see, patterns that move with the ship's roll, like the bars of an old jail, a cage rocking on an endless, unfeeling ocean. There's no memory of a bed, no lasting warmth of clean blankets, no comfort of a soft pillow for your head. Only the hard, tough truth of the ship's wooden planks, maybe a thin, bug-filled straw bed if you're very lucky, pressing into your body, leaving your bones aching and your skin marked with the rough pattern of the wood. Maybe you were lucky enough to get a bit of space in a rough, sagging canvas hammock, a shaky bed slung inches from the snoring, coughing man crammed in below you, and just as close to the one moving restlessly, talking in his sleep, right above. Each roll of the ship sends a jolt through the shaky sleeping spot, threatening to dump you onto the dirty deck. More likely, you find yourself stretched out right on those planks, their surface cold, always damp from leaks or sea spray, and alive with the quiet, unseen movements of things that live in darkness and dirt. The sharp, sad cries of gulls far above are a distant, almost mean reminder of a world beyond these wooden walls, a world of open skies and freedom. Closer, much closer, are the real sounds of your new, unwanted life. The constant, tired creak of ropes pulled tight as they fight the sails in the wind. The steady, hollow slap of waves against the barnacle-covered bottom of the ship, a sound that feels like the ocean itself is patiently always trying to break in, to take back the wood and the people trapped inside. These are the sounds that get into your head, a never-ending soundtrack to being miserable that gives no break, day or night. You try to sit up, a slow, painful movement. Every muscle in your body yells in protest, stiff and sore from sleeping twisted up in such a small space. You feel lost, a thick fog of tiredness and fear in your mind. Your arms and legs ache with a deep, bruising tiredness, as if they've been beaten while you slept, or maybe used as punching bags by the more restless of your unseen bunkmates. Your clothes, the same ragged, badly fitting clothes you've worn for days you can't count, maybe even weeks, are stiff and covered with dried sweat, layers of sea spray, and the built-up dirt of a life lived without the simple thing of clean water. You are on a pirate ship. The thought, though not new, hits you with fresh fear each morning. This is not a ship from a child's adventure story, with bright, polished decks, shiny cannons, and a crew joined by some made-up code of brave friendship. This is a floating hell, a ship alive with real dirt, with quiet desperation, with the always there, chilling shadow of sudden, violent danger. The full weight of your bad situation doesn't hit you all at once. That might be easier to bear. Instead, it seeps in, cold and unwanted like the damp that climbs the wooden walls of this floating jail. First, the smell really gets to you, sticking in your nose and refusing to leave. A sour, almost metal-like mix of old sun-baked tar used to seal the planks. The old sticky sweat of too many unwashed bodies crammed into way too little space. The faint, lasting ghost of old gunpowder, sharp and biting, and the always there, underlying sweetness of things rotting, of food slowly going bad in the hold, of wood giving in to the sea. Then, the sound becomes clear in your mind. Old, overloaded wood groaning under the huge, constant pressure of the sea, a sound that seems to come from the very soul of the ship. The heavy, steady slap of salt water against the hull, a constant, patient attack, and under it all, the low, deep growl of half-sleeping men, their dreams likely as troubled and violent as their waking hours. You stand, or rather, you stumble shakily to your feet as the ship gives a really mean roll, your stomach turning violently, a sick knot tightening deep inside you. It's not just the constant confusing motion of the sea that makes you sick. It's fear. A raw, basic fear that sits cold and heavy in your bones. This isn't an adventure you chose to start. This is raw, plain, moment-to-moment staying alive. And your heart pounds a wild, scared rhythm against your ribs with a silent, awful, growing understanding. You are so far, so terrifyingly far, from everything you once knew, everything that once meant safety, comfort, and home. And there is no turning back, no escape from this creaking, groaning, stinking wooden cage. The deck itself sways and pitches under your feet, not like solid, trusty ground, but like the wet, shifting side of some huge, breathing sea monster, completely uncaring of your growing terror, not bothered by your small human problem. The world has shrunk to these few feet of dangerous wood and the huge, mean ocean that surrounds it. Now that you've managed to somehow drag your aching body from the tangled mess of sleeping forms, the next task, if you can even call it that, presents itself. What passes for hygiene on this godforsaken vessel? The very term morning ablutions feels like a cruel joke, a distant echo from a civilized world you can no longer quite recall. You find what they call the wash station, which is usually just a single battered wooden bucket, perhaps with a grimy communal basin beside it, filled with a few inches of murky, questionable water. Don't get your hopes up for anything resembling freshness. The water is stagnant, lukewarm at best, often smelling faintly of algae in the wood of the barrel it was drawn from days or even weeks ago. It's likely been shared by a dozen other men before you, each adding their own layer of grime to the already suspect liquid. You dip your hands into the water, trying to ignore the film that clings to its surface. There's no thought of a proper scrub, no illusion of a clean face. You splash the tepid water onto your skin, wiping away the worst of the night's accumulated sweat in the ever-present shipboard dirt, but you know with a sinking certainty that you'll never truly feel clean again. Not in this lifetime, not on this ship. The pirate lifestyle, you are quickly learning, doesn't allow for such simple luxuries as soap or truly clean water, or anything remotely resembling a comfortable, predictable routine. You might try to brush your teeth, but that, too, is a laughable notion in this environment. A toothbrush is a fantasy. Perhaps you have a ragged piece of frayed rope end, or if you're resourceful, you might find a stiff twig to chew on. More likely, if you're really lucky, you'll find a small amount of coarse salt to rub against your gums, a brief sharp sting that does little to combat the foul taste that seems to be a permanent resident in your mouth. As you scrub at your face with a damp, probably shared cloth that smells faintly of mildew and old despair, you realize with a chilling finality that this is your life now. The grime will build on your skin, layer by insidious layer, day after grueling day, until you'll eventually forget what clean skin even feels like, what fresh air untainted by human misery smells like. There's no time for self-care here, no moments of quiet reflection or personal grooming. There's no time for anything besides the raw, relentless struggle of surviving another day aboard the ship in this brutal, unforgiving world. Your skin feels constantly sticky, your hair matted with salt and grease. The idea of a hot bath is a fantasy so distant it might as well belong to another planet. You stumble, still groggy and disoriented from your rude awakening and the mockery of a morning wash, towards the area of the ship they generously call the galley. Your stomach, already a tight knot of anxiety and hunger, churns with a grim anticipation of what's on the menu, if such a word can even be applied to the daily offerings here. The pirate ship's kitchen is less a place of culinary creation and more a communal disaster zone, a testament to neglect and necessity. Imagine, if you can, a small, cramped space, often near the ship's open fires, perpetually filled with thick, greasy smoke that stings your eyes and coats your lungs. It's surrounded by haphazardly stored scraps of metal, dented pots and blackened pans caked with the charred remnants of months, if not years, of unappetizing meals. The smell alone is an ordeal. Stale bread, the sharp tang of spoiled salt pork, the faint fishy odor of dried cod that has seen far too many voyages, all mingling into a perfume that makes your stomach clench. What's for breakfast? You probably wouldn't even dare to ask because you already know the answer, an answer repeated with depressing regularity. Hardtack, that infamous, rock-solid, ancient biscuit that pirates seem to consume day in and weary day out. It's often stale, its edges chipped, its surface frequently adorned with the telltale trails and tiny bodies of weevils. If you're lucky, incredibly lucky, you might be offered a sliver of salt pork alongside your biscuit, though the fat is often rancid, a sickly yellow-green, and the meat itself smells more of the churning sea and the brine it was drowned in than anything remotely edible. You eye it with suspicion, knowing that every bite is a gamble. The water? Don't even let your hopes drift in that direction. It's likely brackish, drawn from barrels where it has sat for weeks, acquiring a distinct flavor of old wood, algae, and a general unshakable staleness. It's often tinged with a faint salty taste from sea spray contamination, and it's barely drinkable if at all. But that's all there is to quench the dry, scraping thirst that never quite leaves you, so you'll force it down, trying not to gag, and pray that the invisible things swimming within it don't decide to wage war on your already protesting insides later in the day. Perhaps a ration of grog, that fiery mix of cheap rum and even fouler water, will be offered. It burns as it goes down, a brief deceptive warmth that does little to nourish, but much to momentarily dull the sharp edges of your misery. You eat quickly, hunched over your meager portion, because there's no sitting down for a relaxing, leisurely meal on a pirate ship. Every moment is measured, every action scrutinized. Time is wasted when you're not actively contributing to the ship's function, and you need every ounce of strength you can possibly muster for the long day of backbreaking, spirit-crushing labor that lies ahead. You force down the food, though every dry, tasteless bite feels like you're chewing on the faded, bitter memories of better meals. of times before you ever set foot on this cursed creaking ship, a time when food was a source of comfort, not just a grim necessity for survival. Your jaw aches from the effort of grinding down the hardtack, and the salt from the meat leaves your lips cracked and sore, but you eat, because not eating is not an option. Once that delightful meal has settled in your protesting stomach, if you can even call that grim collection of stale crumbs and salty leather a meal, you're expected to hit the deck, and not with a leisurely stroll. The pirate ship, this floating prison of wood and rope, doesn't care if you're tired, if your muscles are sore from a night spent contorted on hard planks, or if your mind is still reeling from the disorienting roll of the endless sea. It needs its crew working, and it needs it now, without complaint, without hesitation. You'll be barked at, ordered to climb the dizzying heights of the rigging, to haul on thick, unyielding ropes until your hands are raw, to scrub the already filthy deck, or even to assist with the constant, never-ending repairs that keep this leaky vessel from surrendering to the waves. Every moment of your waking day, from the first bleak hint of dawn to the last fading light of dusk, is filled with relentless, physical labor. There's no pause, no quiet moment for a break, no chance to catch your breath. If you're not visibly working, you're almost certainly being yelled at by a scarred, impatient boatswain or a glowering first mate. You're assigned a task, often one that seems impossible for a single man, and you have to get it done. No matter how dangerous, how disgusting, or how utterly exhausting it might seem. The ship's rigging, a complex, tangled web of thick ropes and towering sails, stretches high above you, swaying precariously with every movement of the ship. Each one of those ropes must be constantly checked, tightened, or repaired. You can feel your muscles straining, burning with the effort as you climb the swaying rigging, the wind whipping at your face, the deck a dizzying, distant blur below. Your hands, already raw from previous tasks, are further tormented by the coarse, tarred rope burns and the formation of new, painful calluses. But this is your life now, a never-ending cycle of physical toil that will slowly, inevitably wear you down, body and soul, grinding away at your strength and your spirit. And don't forget the weaponry, the tools of your new, unwelcome trade. You're a pirate now, or at least an unwilling participant in their brutal enterprise. And that means you're expected to know how to fight, or at least how to pretend convincingly. Whether it's a sudden, violent scuffle over a dwindling food ration, a simmering disagreement with a fellow, equally desperate pirate, or the terrifying chaos of a hostile ship encounter, you'll need to be ready at a moment's notice to defend yourself or die trying. You're handed a heavy, poorly balanced cutlass, its edge nicked and stained, or perhaps a cumbersome, unreliable flintlock pistol, tools that feel more like instruments of both survival and indiscriminate violence than of any noble purpose. You'll spend hours, when not engaged in other backbreaking tasks, polishing these tools of death, trying to keep the rust at bay, preparing them for a day, an hour, a moment when you'll undoubtedly need them most, when your life will hang precariously on their flawed, uncertain function. The pirate ship, this floating world of wood and despair, doesn't care that you're new to this life, that your hands are soft, that your heart still longs for a world you've lost. It doesn't care that you're still learning the complex language of knots and sails, or the brutal calculus of survival. Your life, your very existence from one sunrise to the next, now depends on these crude tools working when the time comes, on your ability to obey without question, and on some small flickering ember of luck that you pray hasn't already been extinguished by the salt and the sorrow. There is no escape from the labor, no hiding from the ever-present threat. There are no weekends off on this floating speck of misery, no holidays to look forward to, no quiet Sundays to mark the passage of time. On a 17th century pirate ship, a pirate's life is about one thing, and one thing only: survival in its most raw and unforgiving form. The crew, this motley assembly of men, is a volatile mixture, drawn from all walks of life, from every forgotten corner of the world, each man carrying his own ghosts, his own desperate reasons for being out here on the vast, uncaring sea. Some are undoubtedly seeking gold, their eyes glittering with a feverish hope for plundered riches. Some are running from the long, unforgiving arm of the law, their pasts as murky and dangerous as the bilge water below. And some, perhaps many, are simply trying to escape lives that offer them nothing but poverty, oppression, or despair. But once you step aboard the ship, once you take the oath or are forced into service, all those varied reasons, all those individual histories, get boiled down to one stark, unifying reality: duty. You have a role to play in this grim theater, a task to perform, and you better fulfill it without question, or be prepared to face the swift and brutal consequences. Pirates, despite their reputation for lawlessness, live by a surprisingly strict, though often brutal code. You don't just get to do whatever you want whenever you please. There are rules, unwritten laws forged in the heat of battle and the desperation of survival, and breaking them has immediate and serious consequences. If you're caught stealing from a fellow crew member, even something as small as a ration of biscuit or a swig of rum, you might find your thieving hand unceremoniously lopped off with a rusty axe, a stark and permanent reminder of your transgression. If you dare to raise your voice, or worse, your fist, against the captain or the quartermaster, you'll quickly find yourself marooned on a deserted, sun-scorched island with nothing but a bottle of rum, a pistol containing a single shot, and the crushing weight of your own despair for company. It's a harsh, unforgiving world, this floating republic of outcasts, and the punishment for breaking the deeply ingrained pirate code is often swift, merciless, and deadly. Discipline isn't just about following the captain's orders or adhering to the ship's articles. It's about understanding, deep in your bones, that the only thing that keeps you alive on this treacherous, creaking ship is the fragile, often strained unity of the crew. It's about a rough, unspoken loyalty, a desperate kind of trust. Pirates may not trust the laws of kings or the pronouncements of priests, but in the heat of battle, in the chaos of a boarding action, they must, out of sheer necessity, trust each other. Your life, in those terrifying moments, depends entirely on the man fighting beside you, on his courage, his skill, his willingness to stand his ground, and you better have his back when the time comes, when the air is thick with smoke and the deck slippery with blood, or you'll be the one left behind, a forgotten casualty in a war with no honor and no discernible end. This is not a bond of friendship, not in the way the landsmen know it. It is a pact forged in shared danger, a brotherhood of necessity where survival is the only true currency and betrayal the only unforgivable sin. You watch your crewmates, their faces hard, their eyes wary, and you know that any one of them could turn on you, but also, just possibly, save your life. The monotony of the endless sea, the back-breaking labor, the gnawing hunger, these things grind you down slowly, day by weary day. But then comes a sound that electrifies the ship, a sound that cuts through the boredom and the despair like a sharpened blade. The lookouts cry from high in the crow's nest, "Sail ho!" Instantly, the sluggish energy of the crew ignites. Every man is on his feet, eyes straining towards the horizon. Is it a lumbering merchant ship, heavy with cargo and ripe for the taking? Or is it the dreaded silhouette of a naval warship, bristling with cannon and carrying the king's justice? The captain, his voice suddenly sharp and commanding, barks orders. You scramble to your post, your heart pounding a frantic rhythm against your ribs. Cannons are unlashed, their heavy iron mouths swung towards the enemy. Powder and shot are brought up from the magazine below. Muskets are loaded, pistols primed, cutlasses drawn from their sheaths, their worn steel glinting coldly in the harsh sea light. The chase begins. Your ship, though perhaps not the swiftest, is manned by desperate men, and desperation lends a terrifying urgency to your speed. The wind fills the patched canvas sails, the timbers groaning under the strain. You watch as the other vessel grows larger, its details becoming clearer. The tension on deck is a palpable thing, thick as the gunpowder smoke that will soon fill the air. Then, the first cannon shot, a deafening roar that rips through the relative quiet, followed by the whistle of the heavy iron ball tearing through the air, and the distant, satisfying thud, or perhaps the terrifying splash, as it finds or misses its mark. Your own cannons answer, the recoil shaking the entire deck, the acrid smell of burnt powder stinging your nostrils and making your eyes water. If your ship is faster or luckier, you close the distance. Grappling hooks are thrown, their iron claws biting into the enemy's rigging and railings, pulling the two vessels together with a sickening crunch of wood against wood. Then the captain roars the order to board, and the world dissolves into a red mist of pure, unadulterated chaos. You surge forward with the others, a wave of raw, screaming humanity, brandishing your cutlass or pistol, your only thought to kill or be killed. The enemy deck is a whirlwind of flashing steel, exploding gunpowder, and the terrifying guttural screams of men fighting for their lives. There's no room for strategy here, no time for thought, only instinct and brutal close quarters combat. Splintered wood flies through the air like shrapnel. The deck becomes slick with blood, making your footing treacherous. The air is thick with the deafening roar of cannons fired at point-blank range, the sharp crack of pistols, the clang of sword against sword, and the dying moans of the wounded. You see a man fall beside you, his eyes wide with shock as a musket ball tears through his chest. Another stumbles, clutching a gushing wound, his face a mask of agony. There's no glory here, no heroism, only the grim, bloody business of survival. You swing your cutlass wildly, parrying a blow, thrusting forward, your movements clumsy and desperate, driven by a primal fear you never knew you possessed. The noise is overwhelming, a constant, terrifying assault on your senses. If you are unlucky, a searing pain explodes in your arm, your leg, your chest, and you fall, the world spinning into darkness. If you are lucky, incredibly lucky, you are still standing when the fighting finally subsides, when the last enemy sailor throws down his weapon or lies bleeding on the deck. The silence that follows is almost as deafening as the battle itself, broken only by the whimpers of the wounded and the low, satisfied growls of your victorious crewmates as they begin the frenzied work of looting their prize. The battles, for all their brutal intensity, are often brief. What stretches on, vast and unending, is the sea itself, and with it comes a different kind of warfare, a silent, insidious assault on your mind. Isolation becomes your constant, unwelcome companion. Days bleed into weeks, weeks into months, with nothing to mark their passing but the slow crawl of the sun across an empty sky and the equally monotonous rhythm of shipboard duties. The ocean is an immense, indifferent canvas of gray and blue, stretching to every horizon, offering no landmark, no sign of the world you once knew. You feel terrifyingly small, a speck of driftwood on an infinite, uncaring expanse. The memory of land, of green fields, of solid earth beneath your feet begins to fade, becoming a distant, dreamlike thing you can no longer quite grasp. The faces of loved ones, if you are unfortunate enough to have left any behind, blur and distort in your mind's eye, their names like forgotten shells washed up on a distant, unreachable shore. This isn't the grand adventure sung about in shanties. This is the slow, corrosive unraveling of a man lost to the overwhelming emptiness, where the greatest treasure you might find is a fleeting moment of clarity before the vastness swallows you whole again. Fear, too, is a constant presence, a cold knot in your gut that never truly loosens. You fear the sudden, violent squalls that can appear from nowhere, turning a calm sea into a churning hell of monstrous waves and shrieking winds, threatening to tear your fragile wooden world apart. You fear the silent approach of a heavily armed naval warship, its gun ports like hungry eyes, promising a swift and brutal end. You fear the creeping sickness that stalks the cramped, filthy quarters below deck, turning strong men into shivering, delirious wrecks. You fear the captain's sudden rages, the quartermaster's cold justice, the glint of a knife in a drunken crewmate's hand during a squabble over a stolen biscuit, and perhaps most insidiously, you fear the slow decay of your own mind, the way the endless horizon and the crushing monotony can begin to warp your thoughts, to plant seeds of paranoia and despair. Boredom, a heavy, suffocating blanket, settles over the ship during the long stretches between action. There is nothing to do but the same repetitive tasks, nothing to see but the same endless ocean, nothing to hear but the same creaking timbers and the same crude jokes. Your mind, starved for stimulation, turns inward, replaying old memories, nursing old grievances, or simply drifting into a dull, apathetic haze. It's in these moments of profound stillness that the true horror of your situation can settle in, the realization that this might be all there is, forever. Superstitions, born of fear and the unknown, thrive in this isolated world. Sailors, even hardened pirates, are a superstitious lot. They see omens in the flight of an albatross, in the color of the sunset, in the way a candle flickers in the captain's cabin. They whisper tales of ghost ships sailing silent through the fog, of krakens rising from the deep, of mermaids luring men to watery graves. They perform small, secret rituals to appease the unpredictable gods of the sea, perhaps a dropped coin into the waves before a storm, or a prayer muttered to a forgotten deity when the wind dies and the ship lies becalmed for days under a merciless sun. The brief solace of rum and song offers a temporary, flawed escape. In the evenings, if there's no immediate threat, the crew might gather, their voices raw and off-key, singing shanties of lost loves, distant shores, and battles won. The fiery rum burns away the fear for a few hours, loosens tongues, and fosters a fleeting, boisterous camaraderie. But this relief is short-lived, often leading to drunken brawls, reopened wounds of resentment, or simply a deeper, more profound headache when the harsh light of morning inevitably arrives. The sea offers no true escape, only a constant wearing reminder of your isolation, your vulnerability, and the fragile thread by which your life now hangs. The flash of a cutlass, the roar of a cannon, these are the images that spring to mind when you think of a pirate's arsenal, and they are undeniably part of your new, terrifying reality. But the daily life, the very survival of this creaking wooden world, depends on tools far less glamorous, yet infinitely more crucial. You learn quickly that a pirate ship is a machine, and every part, every rope, every crude instrument must function, or everyone perishes. Your hands, already raw from hauling lines and scrubbing decks, will come to know these other tools intimately. Consider the ship's pumps, not the grand, powerful mechanisms you might imagine, but heavy, awkward wooden contraptions, their handles worn smooth by countless desperate hands. Day after day, you and your crewmates will take turns at these, your bodies straining in a rhythmic, agonizing dance to expel the ever-encroaching seawater that seeps through the hull's strained planks. The water that comes up is foul, black, and stinking, a constant reminder of the ship's own slow decay and the thin wooden skin that separates you from the crushing deep. Then there are the tools of navigation, if such grand words can be applied to the often crude instruments that guide your uncertain path across the vast, featureless ocean. You might see the captain or the sailing master squinting through a simple cross-staff or astrolabe, wooden or brass devices held up to the sun or stars, attempting to gauge latitude. There are no precise GPS systems here, no digital readouts, only these ancient tools, the subtle shift of constellations, and a good deal of guesswork. You watch them, their faces etched with concentration, knowing that a single miscalculation, a forgotten star chart, or a week of overcast skies could mean being hopelessly lost, adrift with dwindling water and no hope of landfall. The charts themselves, when they exist, are precious, hand-drawn on brittle parchment, marked with fantastical sea monsters in the margins and coastlines that often bear little resemblance to reality. Yet these flawed maps are your only guide, your only whisper of direction in an overwhelmingly empty world. You'll become familiar with the heavy mallets and caulking irons used constantly to try and seal the endless leaks in the ship's hull. You'll learn to mix the foul-smelling concoction of tar and oakum, frayed rope fibers, and force it into the gaps between planks, a temporary, messy defense against the persistent sea. Your hands will be perpetually stained black, the acrid scent of tar clinging to your skin and clothes, a constant reminder of the ship's vulnerability. And there are the needles and palms used for sail repair, heavy curved needles and thick leather palms worn to protect your hand as you push the needle through layers of stiff, salt-encrusted canvas. Sails are your ship's lungs, its wings, and they are constantly being torn by storms or damaged in battle. Mending them is a slow, painstaking task, performed high in the rigging or spread out on the crowded deck, your fingers aching, your eyes straining. Even the simplest objects take on a profound importance. The grappling hooks, heavy iron claws attached to thick ropes, are not just for battle. They are used to secure the ship when careening, to haul debris, or to pull alongside another vessel. The boarding axes, short-handled and brutally effective, are kept sharp not just for fighting, but for cutting away fallen rigging or smashing through a barricaded door. Every tool, from the cooper's adze used to shape barrels to the cook's cleaver, is a piece of the puzzle, a necessary component in this desperate floating ecosystem. You learn their weight, their feel, their purpose, because here, on the edge of the world, even a misplaced hammer or a dulled blade can mean the difference between survival and a swift, forgotten end. Life aboard this 17th century pirate ship is, by any measure, a relentless torment. The hunger gnaws, the labor crushes, and fear is a constant cold companion. Yet even in this floating hell, tiny fleeting moments of what might pass for comfort, or at least a temporary dulling of the misery, occasionally break through the grim routine. These are not joys as you understand them from your former life, not the warm embrace of family or the quiet satisfaction of a task well done. No, these are the desperate, snatched pleasures of men living on borrowed time, small, flickering embers in a vast, encroaching darkness. Gambling is one such escape, a desperate attempt to tempt fate in a world where fate seems to hold all the cards. In the dim, smoky light of a swaying lantern below deck, or huddled in a sheltered corner of the main deck when the weather is kind, you see men gathered around a makeshift table, perhaps an overturned barrel or a flat piece of driftwood. Their faces, hard and weathered, are illuminated by the flickering light, eyes narrowed in concentration. They play with crude, handmade dice carved from bone or wood, or with greasy, tattered playing cards, their markings faded from countless hands. The stakes are rarely high in terms of monetary value. Few men here possess more than a handful of stolen coins. Instead, they wager their meager tobacco rations, a share of their next grog allowance, a particularly sharp knife, or sometimes just the grim satisfaction of winning, of feeling, for a fleeting moment, that they have some small control over their wretched destiny. Arguments flare up quickly, voices rising in anger over a suspected cheat or a disputed roll, sometimes escalating to drawn knives and spilled blood, a stark reminder that even in leisure, violence is never far beneath the surface. Then there is the music, if you can call it that. When the day's brutal labor is done, and if the captain is in a rare, indulgent mood, someone might pull out a battered fiddle, its strings often patched with gut, or a simple wooden flute carved during long, idle watches. The tunes are rarely refined, often raw and off-key, but they are heartfelt. Shanties are sung, their lyrics coarse and filled with tales of daring raids, lost loves in the ever-present hungry sea. Voices, rough from shouting orders and breathing salt air, join in a ragged chorus. For a few moments, the shared sound can almost make you forget the creaking of the ship, the stench of the bilge, the ache in your bones. It's a brief, fragile camaraderie, a shared expression of sorrow and a defiant flicker of joy, a reminder that even in the darkest of places, the human spirit still craves a song. And of course, there is the rum, or more accurately, the grog, that fiery, watered-down spirit that is both a blessing and a curse. The daily ration is a ritual, a moment anticipated with a desperate thirst. It burns as it goes down, a harsh fire in your throat and belly, but it brings a temporary warmth, a blurring of the sharp edges of your reality. Under its influence, men become louder, their laughter more forced, their boasts more extravagant. They might share stories, reliving past glories, real or imagined, or simply sit in a companionable drunken stupor. The shared silence a temporary shield against the vast loneliness of the ocean. But this comfort is deceptive. The rum fuels quarrels as often as it fosters friendship, and the morning after brings a head that pounds like a ship's cannon and a spirit even more depleted than before. Perhaps the rarest comfort of all is the occasional capture of a merchant prize that yields not just gold or silver, but fresh food. The sight of a barrel of apples, a side of fresh beef, or a cask of actual wine can send a ripple of near-delirious excitement through the crew. For a day, perhaps two, you might eat something that doesn't taste of salt and despair, a fleeting reminder of a life almost forgotten. These moments are islands of relief in an ocean of hardship, brief, intense, and all too quickly swallowed by the return to your usual grim fare. These are the thin threads of solace in a pirate's life, fleeting, often dangerous, and always shadowed by the brutal truth of your existence. They are not enough to make life bearable, merely enough to make the next wave of suffering a little more distant, for a very little while. The stories paint you as a creature of pure, untamed freedom, a man who has thrown off the shackles of kings and governors, who answers to no law but the one he makes with his own crew, who sails where the wind wills, takes what he desires, and lives a life unbound by the petty rules of the land-bound world. This is the grand myth of the pirate, the intoxicating allure of a life beyond the reach of ordinary men. And perhaps in some small, desperate corner of your heart, a part of you even now clings to that illusion. But the reality, as you are learning with every creak of the hull and every lash of the boatswain's tongue, is a very different, far more brutal truth. What is this pirate freedom you now possess? Is it the freedom to choose your own path? Perhaps, but only if that path leads directly to the captain's orders and the crew's immediate needs. You are free from the taxes of a distant king, yes, but you now pay a heavier toll in sweat, in blood, in the constant gnawing fear that your next mistake will be your last. You are free from the rigid hierarchies of noble courts, but you are now subject to the swift, unceremonious justice of the pirate code, where a show of hands can seal your fate, and mercy is a word rarely spoken and even more rarely shown. The articles you swore to or had forced upon you bind you as tightly as any royal decree, their punishments often far swifter and more final. Are you free to speak your mind? Only if your mind happens to agree with the man holding the sharper cutlass, or the one with the most loyal brutes at his back. Dissent is not tolerated here. It is seen as the first whisper of mutiny, a sickness that must be cut out before it can spread. You learn quickly to guard your tongue, to swallow your grievances, to wear a mask of grudging obedience, because an unguarded word can earn you a slit throat in your sleep, or a quiet final walk off the plank when no one is looking too closely. Are you free from labor? The notion is laughable. Your days are a relentless cycle of backbreaking toil, far harsher than any peasant's lot on land. You are free from the overlord of a manor, perhaps, but you are now enslaved to the ship itself, a demanding, unforgiving mistress that requires constant feeding, mending, and bailing, lest she drag you all down into the cold, dark embrace of the deep. There are no weekends, no holidays, no moments of true, untroubled rest. Even in your fitful sleep, the ship's needs, the captain's orders, the ever-present dangers follow you into your dreams. And what of the freedom to plunder, to take what you want from the merchant ships that are your prey? Yes, that exists, but it is a freedom steeped in terror and violence. It is the freedom of the wolf, a freedom that comes at the cost of another's suffering, another's life. And even that freedom is fleeting. The spoils, if any are won, are divided according to strict rules, and your share, after the captain, the quartermaster, and the more seasoned hands have taken theirs, might be little more than a few tarnished coins, a bolt of cheap cloth, or a barrel of rum that will be gone before the week is out. The dream of mountains of gold and chests overflowing with jewels is just that, a dream, a shimmering mirage that keeps men like you sailing into oblivion. The true freedom on the ship is a stark and terrifying one. It is the freedom from consequence, at least from the laws of the land. But in its place is a different kind of bondage. Bondage to the ship, to the crew's volatile moods, to the captain's whims, to the endless, indifferent cruelty of the sea, and to the ever-present shadow of the gallows that awaits you in any port controlled by the navies of the world. This is not the liberty of soaring eagles. It is the desperate, feral freedom of a cornered animal, a freedom that tastes more of salt and blood than of anything sweet or noble. You are free, perhaps, only to die in a way of your choosing, or more likely in a way chosen for you by the harsh, unblinking gods of this watery hell. The cry from the masthead, "Sail ho!" influential slices through the monotonous rhythm of your day, like a crack of thunder, and every heart on board lurches. Your existence, a grim cycle of labor and hunger, is suddenly, violently thrown into sharp focus. Every encounter with another vessel on this vast, lawless ocean is a gamble, a roll of unseen dice where the stakes are life, death, or if you are uncommonly fortunate, a brief, intoxicating taste of plunder. Not every sail on the horizon means a merchant ship laden with treasure, a helpless lamb waiting for the wolves. Sometimes the approaching silhouette is far more menacing. You learn to read the subtle signs, the number of mats, the cut of the sails, the way the ship sits in the water. These details are scrutinized by the captain and his most experienced hands. Is it a slow, heavy merchantman, its decks piled high with goods, its crew small and likely to surrender without much of a fight? If so, a grim anticipation, a hungry, almost predatory energy ripples through your ship. Cannons are loaded with a practiced, almost eager efficiency. Cutlasses are drawn, their edges tested with a calloused thumb. Pistols are primed, their cold metal of familiar weight in your hand. The captain barks orders, his voice cutting through the creak of timbers, and your ship, sluggish moments before, transforms into a creature of pursuit, its patched sails straining against the wind. The chase might last for hours, even days, a tense, exhausting game of cat and mouse played out on the endless blue. But sometimes the distant sail belongs not to a merchant, but to another pirate vessel. These encounters are fraught with a different kind of tension. Are they friend or foe? Part of your loose confederation, or a rival crew eager to claim your hard-won meager spoils, or even your ship itself? Flags are raised, perhaps your own grim Jolly Roger, or a signal flag whose meaning is known only to a select few. A parley might be called, boats rowing between the two ships under a flag of truce, the captains exchanging wary greetings, sizing each other up. Sometimes these meetings result in a temporary alliance, a joining of forces to hunt bigger prey, or a sharing of information about naval patrols and rich shipping lanes. Other times they erupt into sudden, brutal violence, pirate against pirate, a desperate, bloody struggle for dominance where no quarter is asked and none is given. There is little honor among thieves when resources are scarce. And then there is the most dreaded sight of all, the clean, sharp lines of a naval warship, its gun ports bristling, its decks crowded with uniformed Marines, its flag a stark symbol of the implacable law you have so brazenly defied. When such a ship appears, the mood on your vessel plummets from predatory excitement to a cold, a visceral fear. There's no hope of easy plunder here, only the grim certainty of a desperate fight for survival, or a swift, ignominious capture. The captain might try to run, to use his knowledge of shallow waters or hidden coves to escape, but the naval vessels are often faster, better armed, and relentless in their pursuit. If caught, the battle is usually short and brutal. Your ship's cannons, old and perhaps poorly maintained, are no match for the disciplined broadsides of a man-o'-war. The fight becomes a desperate, last-ditch defense, a refusal to surrender even when the odds are impossibly stacked against you. Even neutral ships, those belonging to nations not actively at war with your kind, are approached with caution. A misread signal, a moment of panic, an overly aggressive move, and a peaceful encounter can quickly turn deadly. Every approaching sail is a question mark, a potential threat, a reminder that on this lawless ocean you are always the hunter, but just as often you are the hunted. Your life is a constant state of alert, your nerves frayed, your trust in short supply, because out here, the next ship you see might be the one that sends you to the gallows, or to the cold, silent embrace of the deep. You quickly discover that life aboard this 17th century pirate ship demands more than just strong muscles and a tolerance for weevils. It requires learning an entirely new language. This isn't the polite, measured speech of the drawing rooms or marketplaces you might have once known. This is the raw, salt-caked vernacular of the sea, a crude, colorful, and brutally efficient dialect spoken by men whose lives depend on quick understanding and unwavering obedience in the face of chaos. Fail to grasp its nuances and you'll earn more than just scorn. You might earn a rope's end across your back or find yourself dangerously out of step when a sudden squall or a cannonball demands instant coordinated action. The orders themselves are a barrage of unfamiliar terms. Haul taut the main brace, the boatswain roars, and you stare blankly, your ignorance a glaring beacon in the flurry of activity around you. Avast ye, someone snarls, and you slowly realize it means stop or hold. Swab the decks, ye lily-livered cur, is perhaps easier to understand, though no less unpleasant in its delivery. You learn that the forecastle is the forecastle, the forward part of the ship where many of the crew sleep in cramped misery, and the quarterdeck is the raised area at the stern, the captain's domain, a place you approach with a mixture of fear and deference. Landlubber is a common insult thrown your way, a constant reminder of your inexperience, your softness, your utter unsuitability for this harsh, unforgiving life. Curses are as common as the creak of the timbers, a rich and imaginative tapestry of blasphemy and nautical metaphors. Men swear by Davy Jones's locker, the mythical graveyard at the bottom of the sea awaiting all drowned sailors. They invoke Neptune or older forgotten sea gods when the winds turn against them. Oaths are punctuated with words that would make a fishwife blush, expressions of frustration, anger, or grim humor that have been polished by generations of hard living and harder drinking. You learn to sprinkle your own speech with these rough jewels, not out of a desire to fit in, but out of a need to be understood, to show that you are, however slowly, becoming one of them, or at least less of an outsider. Beyond the curses and commands, there's the practical language of the ship itself. Every rope, every sail, every spar, every knot has a name, and you are expected to know them all. A sheet isn't something you sleep on, it's a rope that controls a sail. A halyard raises or lowers it. You learn the difference between a square rig and a fore and aft rig, the subtle art of tacking and wearing to change the ship's direction against the wind. This isn't academic knowledge. It's essential for survival. Misunderstand an order during a storm or in the heat of battle, and you could endanger the entire vessel, a mistake for which the punishment is often swift and severe. Even the division of time and the measurement of speed have their own unique terms. Watches are divided into bells, and the ship's progress is logged in knots. You learn to speak of leagues instead of miles, and to gauge the weather not by forecasts, but by the color of the sky, the feel of the wind, and the old, often superstitious wisdom of the more seasoned sailors. This language, born of the sea and shaped by generations of mariners, becomes your new reality. It's a language of survival, often brutal, sometimes poetic, and always demanding your full attention. Because out here, a misunderstood word can be as deadly as a misplaced step in the rigging or a moment of hesitation before a drawn cutlass. The physical hardships of your pirate life, the back-breaking labor, the wretched food, the constant threat of violence, are relentless. But there is another, quieter torment that begins to eat away at you, a slow erosion of the mind itself. It is the crushing weight of navigating the unknown, both the vast, featureless ocean and the increasingly treacherous labyrinth of your own thoughts. Weeks turn into months, and the horizon offers nothing but an endless, unchanging line where gray sky meets gray water. The sun rises and sets with a terrible monotony, each day a grim echo of the last. There are no landmarks here, no familiar stars in these southern skies, no friendly coastlines to offer a whisper of hope or direction. You watch the ship's master, or perhaps the captain himself, hunched over his crude, often inaccurate charts, his brow furrowed in concentration as he attempts to plot a course using nothing but a battered compass, a simple sextant to measure the sun's angle, and the arcane calculations of dead reckoning. He speaks of currents you cannot see, of winds that shift without warning, of islands that appear on one map only to vanish on the next. You see the doubt in his eyes, the quiet fear he tries to conceal, and it seeps into your own soul. What if he is wrong? What if you are sailing in circles, or worse, towards a doom even more terrifying than the one you already inhabit? The fear of being truly lost, adrift in this infinite watery wasteland, with dwindling supplies and no hope of rescue, becomes a palpable presence, a silent crew member that whispers dread into the ear of every man on board. Your own mind begins to play tricks on you. In the long, empty watches of the night, under a canopy of cold, indifferent stars, you start to see things that aren't there. Phantom lights on the horizon, the ghostly sails of ships that vanish when you blink, even the shimmering, deceptive promise of land where there is only open water. The endless rocking of the ship, the constant creak of timbers, the hiss of waves against the hull. These sounds, once merely background noise, begin to take on sinister meanings, as if the sea itself is whispering dark secrets, or perhaps your own approaching madness. Sleep offers no escape. Your dreams are filled with images of drowning, of falling endlessly through black water, of being pursued by faceless horrors. You wake with a jolt, your heart pounding, the taste of salt and fear in your mouth, unsure for a terrifying moment if the nightmare has ended or simply changed its form. The camaraderie of the crew, always fragile, begins to fray under the strain. Men grow sullen, suspicious, their tempers flaring at the slightest provocation. The forced jollity of the shanty sounds hollow now, the laughter too loud, too brittle. You find yourself retreating into silence, hoarding your thoughts like a miser hoards his last few coins, because words feel dangerous, and trust is a luxury you can no longer afford. The lines on your own face deepen, etched by the sun, the salt, and the slow, creeping despair. You catch your reflection in a puddle of seawater on the deck, and for a moment, you don't recognize the gaunt, haunted creature staring back at you. The sea is not just eroding the ship, it is eroding you piece by patient piece, stripping away your memories, your hopes, your very sense of self, until all that remains is the raw, aching will to survive one more day, one more night in this vast, unforgiving emptiness. The end, when it comes, is often not with the thunderous roar of a final glorious battle, nor with the quiet dignity of a life well lived and peacefully concluded. No, for you, a 17th century pirate, the end is far more likely to arrive with the cold and methodical click of shackles, the jeering shouts of a hostile crowd, and the coarse, unforgiving chafe of a hangman's rope. After months, perhaps years, of evading naval patrols, of snatching fleeting victories from the jaws of defeat, your luck, that fickle and unreliable companion, finally runs out. Perhaps it's a swift, brutal encounter with a well-armed frigate, its cannons tearing through your ship's tired timbers, its disciplined marines swarming your decks. Or perhaps it's betrayal from within, a disgruntled crewmate selling your ship's location for a pardon or a handful of silver. Maybe it's simply a miscalculation, a storm that drives you into the waiting arms of the law. However it happens, you find yourself captured. The fight, if there was one, is over. You are disarmed, your cutlass clattering onto the deck, your spirit, if not already broken, now feeling the cold weight of inevitable doom. You are shackled, the iron heavy and biting against your wrists and ankles, a stark symbol of your lost freedom, thrown into the dark, stinking hold of a naval vessel. You are no longer a feared outlaw of the seas. You are a prisoner, a piece of refuse to be transported and disposed of. The voyage to a port of justice, perhaps Port Royal in Jamaica, or some other colonial outpost where the king's law reigns supreme, is a journey into deeper despair. The taunts of your captors, the grim satisfaction in their eyes, the knowledge of what awaits you, these are your new companions. The trial, when it finally comes, is a grim charade. You stand in a stuffy, crowded courtroom, the faces around you a blur of hostility and morbid curiosity. The judge, his face powdered and impassive, recites the long list of your crimes: piracy, murder, rebellion against the crown. There are no sympathetic ears here, no lawyers to argue your case with eloquence or passion. The evidence against you is overwhelming, perhaps even fabricated, but it hardly matters. Your fate was sealed the moment you were dragged ashore. You might try to speak, to offer a defense, to plead for mercy, but your words are swallowed by the heavy silence of the court, or drowned out by the murmurs of the crowd. The sentence is delivered without emotion, a cold, formal pronouncement. You are to be hanged by the neck until dead. The walk to the gallows is your final public appearance. You are paraded through the streets, a spectacle for the townsfolk who line the path, their faces a mixture of fear, hatred, and a strange, unsettling excitement. They jeer, they spit, they throw rotten fruit. "Pirate!" they scream, the word an epithet, a curse. "Thief! Devil!" You are nothing to them now but a symbol of the chaos they fear, a monster to be purged. The rope placed around your neck is coarse, its fibers scratching against your salt-weathered skin. The wooden platform of the gallows creaks ominously beneath your bare, trembling feet. You try in these last terrifying moments to recall the last time you felt peace, the last time you felt anything other than the gnawing ache of hunger, the burning sting of fear, or the dull throb of constant pain. The memory is a distant, faded thing, like a single star seen through a thick, impenetrable fog, almost impossible to grasp. They ask for your last words, a final, cruel formality. You try to speak, but your throat is parched, constricted by terror. Your voice a hoarse, broken whisper that no one in the jeering crowd hears or cares to hear. Maybe it's a curse upon their ordered, hypocritical world. Maybe it's a desperate, choked prayer for a mercy you know will not, cannot, come. Maybe it's just the name of a forgotten love, or a sun-drenched island shore you once called home, a lifetime ago. The drop comes, fast, final, unexpectedly, brutally, devastatingly silent. And just like that, your day, your life, Your brief, violent sojourn as a 17th century pirate ends not with a chest overflowing with glittering treasure buried beneath a hidden palm tree, not with a defiant roar against a stormy sea, but with the rough, unyielding caress of a rope and an abrupt, all-consuming silence. The same profound, echoing silence you first felt when you stepped onto that creaking, groaning deck, when the vast, indifferent sea first seemed to swallow your name, and the taste of salt stung your lungs like a bitter, inescapable premonition. It's not just the end of a life, it's the final, inevitable return to that first haunting, inescapable stillness, the silence of the deep, the silence of the forgotten. Centuries later, children, their faces bright with innocent, unmarred excitement, will dress as pirates for play, for school festivals, for pure, imaginative fun. They will shout, "Ahoy, matey," and brandish harmless plastic swords, their young dreams filled with tales of buried gold, thrilling escapes and swashbuckling adventures on sun-drenched tropical seas. But they don't know the truth. They will never know your name, your grinding hunger, your constant fear, the true, unvarnished misery of your existence. Your bones, if they were ever granted the dignity of a burial, are now indistinguishable from the common dust beneath some foreign, unhallowed and long-forgotten soil. Your story, what little of it might have been whispered by firelight or in hushed tones in dockside taverns, has become a faint, fading whisper in the endless, mournful howl of the wind. But the sea, the vast, timeless, indifferent sea, she remembers. She always does. She holds the echoes of your untold suffering, the bitter salt of your unshed tears, the dark iron of your spilled blood, deep within her cold, dark, and restless heart, a secret kept for eternity. So, as you lie there, safe in your bed, with soft sheets and the gentle hum of modern life around you, perhaps you can appreciate the stark contrast. The life of a 17th century pirate was not one of romance or daring freedom, but a relentless, brutal grind against the elements, against disease, against each other, and often against hope itself. You wouldn't have lasted a day, not because of weakness, but because the very fabric of that existence was designed to break the human spirit, to strip away comfort, dignity, and peace, leaving only the raw, desperate will to see another sunrise, however bleak. Their songs may echo in our imagination, but their suffering is a history best left in the deep, dark waters of the past. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Sleep well, and may your dreams be far from the creaking timbers and cold spray of a pirate's harsh sea.